Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Old Reader, New Reader. We're here with Crisis. Before I call you Crisis, since it says Crisis?
Yes.
All right.
It's easier to find me that way. There's like some kind of like Russian DJ, and there's like a Twitch streamer, but there's really only a few Crisises. So if you're looking for Crisis in comics, you're probably gonna find me.
There we go.
And if you get me mixed up with the DJ, cool.
I hope that's like your secret job, like you're out here just DJing.
It's all three me. It's like a Moon Knight situation.
Yes, love it. Absolutely. Except for like, I'm just picturing just three different yous in a moon. Like, you know, they like the three wolf moon shirts. Like, but now I just see like three of you, like different egos and stuff. It could be. It's possible.
That could be all of my moonlighting, also as Crisis.
Yes. So yeah. Welcome to your first official. We don't count the last one. It was a cameo. Your first official guest appearance on Old Reader, New Reader.
I know, Omar, it's like one of those things where Marvel has the character debut in an event, but they're like, but their real first appearance is in a month. And you're like, you assholes, you released the event issue first. Yeah. Now everybody's going to speculate on that one. But this is officially my debut.
Yeah, Omar was allowed to do that for his birthday month, which is finally almost over.
Your long national nightmare has almost ended. Oh, March, only 4 more days and you're out.
I need to like work harder on my birthday month, like the way that he does. I need to fix that up, but
I used to do like kind of birthday week. Yeah. Right. I think that's a fair game to kind of make it weekend to weekend. So you get like a full 8 or 9 days of celebration.
I love it. I mean, I like being an extra around my birthday, so I can't blame him. So we are talking about Peacemaker Tries Hard! ! By Kyle Starks and is it Steve Pugh? I wrote it down earlier. Yes, Steve Pugh.
Steve Pugh.
So this is a what? My words have left me. This isn't like an Elseworld sort of thing, but sort of, you know, it's one of those things you can read and you're like, is it canon? Is it Black canon? It's not, but it's
well, that's the whole Black Label thing, right? It's like we're a little transgressive, but we're mostly recognizable, but you don't have to worry about us if you don't want to worry about us. Which is fine. It's DC's whole gig, right? Elseworlds is and kind of borderline Elseworlds that you're not really sure about is their whole thing. That's how DC managed to do so many crossovers with other characters and companies, which Marvel just really does not often do. So more power to them. It's not my normal jam. I mean, I can't believe I'm on a show talking about a DC Black Label book with you, talking about 2 words that are the kiss of death for if I'm not going to like a comic, but.
Yay. Yeah, a lot of times I like a lot of like non-canon books just because it's I fall in and out of DC. Like I DC's my first love. I love DC, but sometimes it's hard for me to catch up on DC, like, except for like what I'm really into, which is Green Arrow right now. But like I love a nice little extra one and done that I can recommend to people. It's like, hey, you don't know a lot of DC? Here's this. And recommending this is also kind of a weird thing to be like, hey, here's this weird character that if you didn't watch the show, maybe you don't know them.
And I haven't. I've seen the show I watched it for the opening credits because everybody was talking about it.
Fantastic.
And then getting things in New Zealand is weird because you never know if you're going to get it on streaming or what streaming, because we don't have HBO Max. And so finally it popped up on something and I kind of like put it on as I was doing dishes or something. So I kind of like half saw, half understood. I got some of the stuff with his dad, but I've never read Peacemaker in a DC comic. I've never seen the Suicide Squad movie. So I've half watched 1 episode of his TV show, and that is my only experience with this character. So I'm truly new reader here. It's really hard to catch me unaware on a comic topic, but you got me.
We've done it, baby. Yeah, I watched Suicide Squad and I hated him in there. I hated him. I was like, oh, why is he getting a show? I cannot believe this. And then finally the show came out like much late, and I waited till a lot later to watch it. And it actually worked for me in a way I was not expecting it to work. And so when I saw that Kyle Starks was working on this book, which I'll call him a friend of the show. He's a friend. I knew I had to pick it up because I love his humor in person and as a writer, and I love all of his work. So I was like, yes, absolutely, I'll be there. And I love this. Oh, so Jonathan said, John Cena makes it hard for me to like anything. He's someone that's really grown on me, honestly. I think it's just how witty he is, weirdly. He's quick. About is New Zealand a real country?
Yes.
Apparently. I've heard about it in the
signs point to yes, but some days I'm not so sure.
So I guess let's dig into this. So this is about 6 issues, and I'll give like a not like a play-by-play overview, but basically, we start with Peacemaker, and he. I guess there's a few plots. The oh my god, I promise I can talk. It's been a day, you guys. Work is hard.
Work is hard.
It's hard.
I was like stress woke up in the middle of the night, like, well, I guess I could just start working if I'm awake at 4 a.m. What else is there to do? Work is hard. That's why we love comics.
Yes. So there's a few different plots in here. Like one of the ongoing kind of joke plots in here is that not John Cena, he's Peacemaker, but he looks just like John Cena, is throwing a birthday
who has
party.
drawn him immaculately as John Cena?
Oh, like, I mean,
clearly there's plenty of work to do study from, but his face, it's perfect.
Spot on. So he has a birthday party coming. He's trying to invite people, but no one wants to come. So that's part of this ongoing kind of joke plot throughout here, this ongoing bit, which I love. I think it's really funny. And he gets sent on a job finally, but not by who he would expect. He gets sent on a job by the brain and Monsieur Mala. I never know how to say his name.
I just give it some,
imagine Monsieur Mala.
Flair. Monsieur Mala.
I mean, I took French for so long, and I was like,
same.
Nah.
I was at a school tour with my daughter the other day, and they were making crepes, and the French teacher was there. I'm like, okay, all you have to do is say, "Would you like to eat a crepe?" And like the hamster in the wheel on my brain was running so hard, and I'm like, mange. Like it was so slow. But I read French pretty well. So when people in the comments speak French on here, I look real smart. But then if we were to try to stream in French, that would be a disaster.
Yeah, there's no way. There's no way. Yeah, my reading French is not bad. And then my my speaking Japanese is better than my reading.
Ooh.
And so is my Chinese. Because I got to college and I was like, I don't want, French is hard. And I just threw it away. And I took 2 other hard languages instead.
Yeah, way to just ramp up the difficulty. Don't drop back to anything. No.
That's why I'm so burnt out.
I will say that I could understand all of the French in the comic book without having to look any of it up. So that's whatever reading level of French that is, I'm there. So sorry, this was all a sidetrack. So he takes a mission that is not his normal mission, but he's like moonlighting on moonlighting. Yeah. Technically, he's on probation. But then technically he's kind of sort of still on call with Amanda Waller and the Suicide Squad, who could kind of sort of blow up his head, maybe still if they felt like it. And then also he's going to save this adorable dog, which we'll get to in a second, which brings him into doing a mission for Monsieur Mala and the brain.
Yeah, because basically they asked him to go on this mission and he is really lonely. So they say, we need you. And he's like, oh my God. You need me? Yeah, I'll go. And Mr. Mala at the same time is like, I'll be your buddy.
We need you. Yeah.
And he's like, oh my God, a friend. He likes my music. Okay, I'll go. He's a simple man.
Well, I want to talk about that. I really want to start there. So there's this panel that I clipped where he's driving the car. I think he's got the dog in the passenger seat, and he says, I just want to be seen, to be acknowledged as something worthy of anyone giving a crap about, more than just a blunt object. Maybe that's too much to ask. And I'm like, so human. Here's this like super cartoonish character that says he will eat poop for peace. Will eat poop for peace. #. And he's just like any of us, really. He just wants to be seen for what he's good at. Like, haven't we been in a situation at work or, you know, even with friends or anywhere where we're like, I wish they would just see me for this thing that I'm doing well over here. Or like when we're the young one in the family and they're like, I know what I'm doing. I don't need somebody to explain this to me. Or that's all anybody wants. And so to take this hero and to show us him being super violent and cartoonish, and then have him to take off his helmet and be all sweaty and just be like, I want to be used for being more than just a blunt object, kind of really like got me.
He's deceptive. You know, this comic is funny. Peacemaker is funny. But there's like a real sadness to him as being this character who's really earnest, weirdly. And he's awkward and he says the wrong thing because he was raised incorrectly. You could really do a deep dive in just like toxic masculinity, the way that he was raised. That's kind of emotional. And I just realized, I read this like a few weeks ago and I was like, I don't need to read it again. And I skipped over the most important part of the story, which is that he saved his dog on this first mission. They named Bruce Wayne because he's such a little fancy man.
He's a fancy little man.
He's a fancy little gentleman. And that's why he goes on that mission with Monsieur Mallah and the brain, because they steal his dog. And that's
that he's had for literally 10 minutes of plot time before it gets stolen, which just made, because I went back to reread it this morning and I was like, oh man, he loved that dog. And then when you reread the first issue, you're like, he just stole that dog from somebody else.
And he doesn't need to know. He's a sweet boy. He's a sweet, giant killing machine man. And he loves that dog immediately. And he has no one and he's so lonely. So he's like, yes, this is my friend forever.
Yeah.
And now you've stolen my dog. So yes, I will go. But also, I'm gonna go because you made me feel important. I have my headphones on, so I can't do like the hair behind my ear thing.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that whole toxic masculinity thing for a second, because I didn't like zero in on that, but now that you say it, it's like, it's so interesting because I expected him to be a toxic character, right? Not having seen the show or anything. I'm like, oh, John Cena and like James Gunn can kind of lean into mocking that through humor. So I kind of expected him to be this monument of toxicity, right? But all through the plot, pretty much from the first scene, he's kind of like okay with everybody. He makes it really, really clear that he's like non-judgmental, be who you want to be, use the bathroom you want to use, whatever your deal is. He just does not care if you will come to his barbecue. That is all that he cares about. But then when you contrast it with how he's been raised, it's like, oh my gosh, but he was raised in the complete opposite environment of that. Only tough guys matter, never cry, never get upset, always hit back, always hit first, right? And so it's just this really funny study of like, he wants to be accepting and he's actually a big softie, but he has no model in his life for how to do that until he gets to be better friends with his gay handler in this book. And then like, he kind of like realizes that you don't have to hide acceptance behind this front of toughness. You can just be soft. Like you don't have to be like, I accept you, mother, you know? And that was really, really unique and fascinating to me.
Well, and that's why he's such an interesting character. Because like when I saw him in Suicide Squad, I was like, I don't care about this man. He's like, I kill for peace, blah, blah, blah. And he says really offensive things. I'm like, I don't care about him.
No.
I care about
my brain shuts off really fast in those situations in movies when I see that character.
Yeah, I was like, no.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I don't need this whole, like, I'm being edgy, funny the whole time kind of joke. And then I watched the show, and I was like, oh, okay. You were raised by a really awful racist dad. Like, a super racist dad who's really mean to you, and you just didn't know any better. And you don't know any better. And then reading the comic, I think Kyle did a fantastic job with him. Man, there's so much to talk about. So, I guess we kind of jump around here. So I guess let's talk about the first, like his mission first, then with Monsieur Mallah, because they get there, and first of all we fight the demolition team, which I thought was a fantastic bad guy group that was so witty and funny. The supervillain construction team, evil laborers, but good union folk. Their dues are always up to date, and there's so many jokes throughout here where they're trying to follow OSHA guidelines basically, and they talk about their so they're having this big fight. Jackhammer's getting attacked by Peacemaker, and one of the people goes over to their colleague and they're like, hey, you need to help. Like we're in a fight right here. And he says, I get a mandated 30-minute break every 4 hours. You got a problem with that, you take it up with union standard. And she's like, but Jackhammer is the union standard. I think that's so funny.
And I love any superhero thing that has bureaucracy. And I know Omar will tease me because that means I like things like X-Corps, where he's like, how could you? Yeah. I think it's because I grew up reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy constantly over and over again, as my child does. I didn't make her. It's just genetic. And Hitchhikers is all about the comedy of being the most useful person stuck in the middle of a bureaucracy and not being able to like wade out of it in any direction. And I love when any kind of heroes or villains are in that in a superhero book. And even his situation where he's like stuck between this bail officer and then the Suicide Squad, and he like can't leave the state and all these things. It's just like he could do whatever he wants. He's Peacemaker. But I love any kind of story that mires a superhero in these kind of ridiculous bureaucratic moments. And so of course, in the middle of a super fight where the one character on your demolition team who could maybe stand up to Peacemaker, he's like, this is my union mandated break. I'm sorry. There's nothing that can be done.
Yeah, everyone, there's such like a there's such a wittiness to each interaction here in each fight, which I love so much. Because even after here, when like there's this big fight in the bar, because he's resting up in a bar, he's not doing well. He's trying to take care of all of his wounds with pads, which
Oh
makes
my
sense.
gosh. So funny. Just all pads and tampons and feminine hygiene products all as bandages. And I'm like, yeah. And then I thought this is just going to be an implied joke. You're not really going to illustrate it. And then the next page he walks into
Yeah, I'll do a quick little show of that because she's just in the bar. He goes into the bathroom and sees like the pad machine and like, you know, gets those out. I was like, yeah, of course. Absolutely. And then he just has this really just sad moment at the bar where she's like, hey, are you okay? And he goes to this like emotional offloading onto her, like, I'm gonna be honest with you, no, I'm not doing great. And he's like talking about how lonely it is and how his only friend is a dog. And it goes through all this stuff, and she's like, "Oh, I don't care about that. You might need like a doctor, because you know you've got like a tampon stuck in your wound there. I'm not here for your emotional like your trauma dumping right now. Are you okay physically?"
And I actually clipped that sequence too because there's a lot of really fun sort of rhetorical things that they're doing with that sequence. As he talks, it gets to a point where there's just a solid follow spot on him and he's alone on the stool, even though really he's in the bar. And so it kind of turns it into, he's this like character in a play. It's almost like zoomed out and turns him into a character in Death of the Salesman. And he's just on the stage talking about it. Yeah. And then right on the page, I love a smash cut on a page turn. So you see how it goes in and in and in.
Yeah.
And then he's just on the stool and then smash cut and the page turn. She's like, I just was asking if you're like, okay to drink. But I think that that's a really good, who will ever know, right? Unless we ask Kyle what, if he scripted it exactly that way, if that was Steve Pugh in the art that way. But what I really started to recognize was, so Steve Pugh is one of the main artists on Mark Russell's The Flintstones.
Oh.
And the joke setup and delivery here is really similar to Flintstones. And it really made me reflect on that kind of old comics chestnut of, you don't know who made that rhythm happen. You don't know if it was the writer or the artist, and everybody says the writer's so funny. But I know Kyle Starks is funny. I've read some of his other comics and really liked him recently, but Steve Pugh is a funny artist. And I think a lot of the rhythm and the setup knockdown is in the art. If you go through and you find all the places where you laugh in this book, you're laughing because he delivers the punchlines perfectly.
Yeah, I think people forget too, because like, you know, this big issue on like, I mean, you're on comic Twitter as much as I am, but like, or on like the net of discussions where there's a lot of issues. People will just talk about the writer in comic books, they don't talk about the artist. And really, is this such a collaborative experience throughout all of these? Like it's both of them kind of creating that narrative and how that flow together. It's the same way that you're like having somebody, your director and your writers work together. They're putting that vision at the same time.
Right, and just because the writer ostensibly wrote something that could be a funny joke, the director and the actors and the lighting, everything executes that. I mean, this is colored by Jordi Belair, one of my favorite colorists in all of comics, and the coloring is really good. It's like super saturated, but it's not trying to be real world colors. But it's also not trying to be super shiny and glossy. I mean, his helmet is shiny, but it's not that like Marvel house style look where everything's super reflective and overshined. It's like knocked back a little bit. And then also I gotta mention the lettering by Becca Carey, who I don't think I've ever read a comic lettered by Becca Carey before, but the lettering is in the art. So many of the gags have actual lettering in the gag. The first one,
workplace accident.
Or like the first one, he punches somebody in the crotch and the letters pop up and says, flawless victory. Like, again, did Kyle Starks write that in his script? Almost certainly. But did the lettering perfectly execute that in a way that made me giggle and felt like Batman going pow in a 1966 Batman show? Yes.
It's so good. It just does so much. I love all of these. It's just, everything makes me, like, especially that workplace accident joke when they fight them again, they show up. And then everybody in the bar's kind of got his back then because they're like, okay, no supervillains are allowed in this bar. But this superhero, this guy who cries, it's okay to cry. He's allowed. I love him so much. He's so cute.
Now I want to talk for a second about Peacemaker's complete divorce from how the world actually works. Because, so I was one of these like only children who always read books and stuff. I was the kid who like said the words wrong because I only had ever read them in the book. And even though I was book smart, I had no concept of real world stuff, and I was not like outdoorsy or anything. So if somebody would say, oh, you just do blah, whether it to be to climb something or to plant something, to me that was magic. And I just had such a moment with this comic where his handler is offering him honey, and he is convinced that honey is some kind of bee excrement, which I mean it is after, but he says, you think bees got a special hole they make honey with? It's either bee piss or bee poop, or I guess best case scenario, it could be bee puke. Now I had to look this up because I did not know, but honey is made from nectar. And so it's not technically poop, spit, or vomit, although they do store nectar inside their body in their quote unquote honey stomach, which is not not a euphemism. They literally have a honey stomach. But it's just funny to me because, again, it connects to when you're really sheltered as a kid, whether it's in a good way or in an abusive way, like Peacemaker, he doesn't know how to engage with the world at all. And so he's just trying to do the thing that he thinks is best, that he thinks is nice or charming or funny. And it just alienates people from him more. So it like really over time kind of strikes me not only as like a fish out of water story, but also as kind of like a neurodivergent story, which is, I'm not diagnosing a character.
I was like, literally as an autistic person, I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. This is exactly what the experience is. Because yeah, he's trying to say the right thing. He's trying to say the funny thing. He's trying to just be himself, but he just doesn't know. You don't know what you don't know until somebody tells you.
Right. And he exists in this world where nobody engages with him deeply enough to tell him things. And so he's got this pretty good heart and he thinks he's really funny and nobody will let him in on the joke he has become, which is what makes it so tragic, even while you're like totally hilariously laughing at him.
And okay, so we did talk about the Red Beast. We have to talk about his, I don't know if this is a character that exists before. I didn't look it up. I should have looked it up.
I'll look it up.
But his parole officer, basically, like the person who monitors him on behalf of Amanda Waller, is this former superhero called the Red Bee. First of all, his outfit is fabulous. So when you first meet him, you know that he controls bees, but you don't know a lot about him. And there's this great moment where he finds out that, I'm about to call him John Cena again, that Peacemaker went outside state lines. And he's like, oh, I've got to take you in. And he wrecks him. And Peacemaker's like, oh, I can beat up this man. I just beat up 18 old men. I'll be fine. And he wins, but he's like, hey, let me go. I gotta go get my dog. Like, I need my dog. They took my dog. He's like, oh, if that's the case, then that's fine. Let's go get your dog back together, which is adorable.
So the internet is telling me that Red Bee was a real character that debuted in Hit Comics in 1940, which was published by Quality Comics, and that was later obtained by DC, but also technically falls into that zone of DC heroes that are sort of public domain, but then sort of not. Okay. And then he was brought back in Uncle Sam and the Freedom Fighters in 2007, but he's not really a recurring... Actually, he wasn't brought back. Somebody as his grandniece was brought back. So I think this idea of him in the present day in this book is an invention of Kyle Stark's. I mean, I love him. Where's my Red Bee miniseries? He's amazing.
Yeah, obsessed. But yeah, for people who are, I mean, I can show it from the page, but let me upload this little overlay.
He's got these great blousy pirate sleeves. Yeah. So he does exist. He is a historical character.
Yeah, so he just, I mean, he can fight and everything, but he controls one bee. And I love that. Can you imagine? He was like Ant-Man. He was like, yeah, I control all ants. He's like, no, I only control one bee, but that's all you need. It's like, that's confidence. And so he used to fight the Nazis, apparently. But of course, they get a little liberal with the language, how he talks, because it's 8:27. No, I can't. Can I say it? I'll say dicks. I'll say, so the Red Bee is here to kick your dicks off. And I'm like, that's really good. And Peacemaker's like, what's up with the sleeves? You're wearing a super blouse, my guy.
It's very like, hey, Seinfeld in a pirate shirt.
Here,
yeah.
Ne'er-do-wells. This costume is going to strike seizures into epileptics. It's so witty.
But then later in a fight, it actually pays that off because somebody goes to grab him and like toss him, and they just grab his shirt sleeve and it just rips and he dispatches them. So I said, like, see, that's functional. He didn't get. It's not like a cape. No capes. It's not like a cape that's gonna get tangled. It's just a blousey sleeve.
And he still keeps a nice beard with it. It's a look. It's a look. It's a vibe. And I love him.
How is this book this funny? Like, Maddie, I don't like funny stuff. I'm not a humor fan. I don't like comedians. Like, I'm very...
It's so funny.
But I laughed reading it, and now I'm like, can't keep a straight face talking to you about it. I don't know what's wrong with me.
I could cry thinking about how stupid it is. It's stupid humor, but it's really witty humor. And it's, if you've read any DC... You don't need to read DC books to like enjoy the jokes in here, but if you do, you kind of enjoy it even more. Like if you're a Batman fan, and we'll get to that, like the best part of the book.
Oh, I have a ton of Batman bits bookmarked to talk about. We'll have a whole Batman sequence coming up.
Oh yeah, because we're just getting to that point. Yeah. So in the next part, this is the best part. I mean, General Immortus is here, which is funny. We should talk about that, I guess. Criminal genius and master strategist, hundreds of years old, and looks it. And they threaten him by saying, "Oh, I'll smash your head in with a napkin holder, like the ones that hold them like at restaurants." Or no, he said, "I'll say shove up your butt."
Yeah, it's not smash his head in. I can tell you that for sure. Yeah, they tell him they're gonna like shove this napkin dispenser up his butt, and he's like,
"Oh, old wrinkled ass." Okay.
Yeah,
and he's like,
"Somebody's lived as long as me."
He's like, I was alive at the dawn of man, boy. I've touched every spot on this wretched planet and drew blood on the most. I've lived countless years with endless time. There's nothing I haven't seen or done. You think that? Or do you honestly think that in all of my long life, I've never had a napkin dispenser in my rectum? Do you really consider that a threat to me? And then he holds it for a second, and you have this like look where he just looks at it, and he's like, well, you'd be right. It was very uncomfortable, and I really didn't like it. So, all right, what do you want?
But to me... Like this is a lot of people like a book that's like profane and has dick jokes or whatever in it, but so often they like punch down or they're there just to be gross, and like I get turned off. And if you like that, it's no judgment on your humor. I'm just saying it's not my humor. But I love profanity. I truly, truly do. I mean, I grew up watching George Carlin all the time. And it was like, if I was singing a song with profanity in it, I could sing along to the profanity. Basically, as long as the profanity was art, right?
Yeah.
So I love a profane gag like that one, and like so many ones in this book. There's no down punching. It's not there to gross you out. It is just, it's obviously scatological, but it's scatological in a way that is only making fun of that one character and making him look silly without kind of like making anybody look bad or dumb or gross. Yeah. And that to me is
like the difference between like, I would say like Family Guy and Bob's Burgers. Like there's a difference on who's the butt of the joke in this.
Yes.
What the timing is like. And it's done so well here. And then of course we get the best part in the entire book, which we do have to talk about. Where Peacemaker calls Amanda Waller and tells her that Bruce Wayne has been kidnapped. He does not reveal that it's his dog. Amanda is like, oh my God, stop the presses. But how do you know him? It's like, oh, we really hit it off the other day. He was at my home. Like, what do you mean he was at your home? Eating beanie weenies, chilling out, being adorable. And she's like, wait a second. Is this the same Bruce Wayne we're talking about? He says, verbatim, he's a fancy boy, very handsome, perfect little nose, looks like he's wearing a nice suit. And she said, that's definitely him, all right. And it's the funniest page I've ever read in comic books. It's so good. It's so funny to me.
And maybe this can lead us into the Batman sequence of this. So Peacemaker does not know that Bruce Wayne is Batman. No. He just knows that Bruce Wayne is a fancy little man. And he also knows that he actually hates Batman, is what I got from this. So it all starts out with him. And so he's got this dog that he's named Bruce Wayne that he's in love with. But then at the same time, he's making jokes about how dumb Batman is. So he's riding in the car with Monsieur Mala and he says, dude, I'm way better than Batman. That guy's been fighting the same clown for 20 years. You know how many clowns I could beat up in 20 years? Like, and it's just, again, like Kyle Stark's perfect comedy. Having somebody complain about Clark Kent and love Superman, right? Like, and to play that and to have the whole plot hinge on him trying to save this dog called Bruce Wayne and really just hating Batman. And then every time he talks to Waller on the phone about the Suicide Squad, she says they're busy with some other Batman villain. And then Peacemaker's like, oh, you're going to have clay under your fingernails for weeks. Because he actually, yeah, he actually wouldn't want to be Batman. He's just saying he could do it better. If he wanted to, he could do it better, but he's not gonna.
Oh, what I wouldn't give for Peacemaker in Gotham. I mean, he's not sneaky at all. Everyone would know he's there immediately, but they also wouldn't take him seriously. He'd do great. He'd be great.
It would be a really funny book to do, like a Peacemaker versus Gotham villains book, because they're all so arch and like campy because they are so arch, and to take somebody this plain and to insert them into the situation. The one gag that made me laugh, possibly the hardest in the whole book, is we see all of Peacemaker's helmets, and they do, one of them shoots flames or whatever, and there's one very silently in the bottom row that never gets remarked on that just says Bane voice.
It's so good. I'm very curious about a lot of them personally. I love that he chooses a helmet for each mission. I think it's great.
I don't know. Is that like in continuity? Does he really have different helmets? Is it in the show? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It just made me wonder if many heroes have to be neurodivergent in some manner in order to do what they do. Listen, I have a whole theory about Batman, because no neurotypical person just leaves a conversation when they're bored. So just saying, he's really committed to the bit. Anyways.
But the Batman gags kind of go, and they're really subtle. It's not like the whole book is him joking about Batman, but because the dog is called Bruce Wayne, every time there's a Batman callback, it just gets, how hilarious it is just builds up and builds up every time there's a gag. And it never really pays off. It's just a running gag throughout the book, but I just laughed harder and harder. And I have that same Amanda Waller whole sequence copied and pasted into my notes because I just laughed so hard.
So good. So I really love this next part, and not because I really care about the villain of this, the like cocaine addict guy, but because I really like the pilot that they recruit, because the pilot from Red Bee's past, who was like a, kind of a dork, like had like a very like stereotypical comic book like sidekick, like, oh golly gee willikers, that kind of type. He's like a lollipop and a big jacket, and this little guy, and he's like,
oh, the lollipop took me out.
And he's like, you sure you're 18? You can fly this plane? Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I am.
And now he's just this old dude who is just like the most caricature of just like, hey, what do you mean? I can still fly this plane. I don't need to see anything. And it's dumb. But I like it.
Well, it's like, again, Kyle Starks. I mean, I really have my eye on him. I first read him like not even 2 months ago for this channel, because he wrote, I think it's called Marvel Unleashed. Is that, yeah, Marvel Unleashed, which is actually a Pet Avengers book and probably would have sold better if they called it that. But it was just him writing all of the various Pet Avengers as if they were just heroes with real voices. Lucky the Pizza Dog, Red Wing, Chewie from Captain Marvel. And it was, when I tell you, it was like laugh out loud, stupid funny. And then it took me a while. Maddie actually had to put it together for me as we were in the pre-show for this, that it's the same author. I thought it was a different Kyle. And but it's that same humor because he really understands how to play with a trope. Like he takes the trope of the old grizzled veteran pilot. We all know this trope. We've seen it hundreds of times in Indiana Jones movies and Wolverine comic books. And then he immediately turns it on his head by not only having him have been this like Jimmy Olsen, Bucky Barnes type, but also making him, having Steve Pugh, draw him like a member of the Lollipop Guild, which just like takes the joke over the moon. But that I'm discovering both Starks and Pugh are known for those punchlines. So they work really well together. I would say if you like Mark Russell, if you like Billionaire Island, if you like Second Coming, all those Mark Russell books for Ahoy Comics, if you like Dragonfly and Dragonfly Man from Ahoy Comics, which is not by Russell, the author is escaping me at the moment, that's the humor level of this book. And all of those books I think this is actually funnier than Mark Russell, but I have a whole Mark Russell essay I could do. So we'll save that for sometime. We'll read a Mark Russell book.
Listen, Nikki, if you had shown me this book, like, I don't know, 2 years ago, I'd have been like, no, I don't want to read this. Like, well, if you just show me, if you described his character, I'm like, no, I don't get it. And I'm in love with him. I do just say this one line here I really like from the pilot, and I won't read it verbatim, even though it's usually you can say the F word once it's not if it's past 5 minutes. But he's like, I can still do the 3 most important things in life: flying, effing, and fornicating. And he's like, this old guy's got dementia, Richard. Those last 2 things are the same thing. Maybe to an amateur they are. This makes me... Oh, it's so...
Like, I literally said to you when we started chatting at verbatim, here's my chat to Maddie. As much as I want to go big too by choosing Peacemaker, I don't tend to like funny books. I'm afraid I'll be a miserable asshole.
But gotcha.
You got me.
Yeah, when I read this, I was like, is this gonna be one of my favorite books of the year? And I feel like it might. Last year it was It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth or the World.
Oh,
like,
that was my first read of the year this year. I always try to pick something really like big and significant. Yeah.
That was my top read of last year. And I'm like, is this year gonna be Peacemaker Tries Hard? Because it's so far, it's still my favorite thing I've read. And I've read a lot this year already. But I love it so much.
I guess another thing to talk about with him is it's like, I guess we've hit on this a little bit already, but because he's smart in his own way, and he's an effective hero, and they give him all of these absurd, situations. He fights a villain powered by cocaine, which, is maybe the most broad bit in the whole thing. I'm like, okay, I get it. He likes snorting cocaine. That was maybe the one time my eyes rolled a little bit hard.
Yeah, same.
But it's the way that they make Peacemaker so effective, because they can pivot him, right? If he's fighting somebody who is actually very serious, Peacemaker is funny because he's absurd. But then he works in this way because of what he was and how he was created as a character, that you can have him fight somebody very ridiculous and you can play him totally straight. And he almost comes off in that situation like US Agent, right? Who is not meant to ever be funny. And you can play him totally straight. And like Kyle Starks really threads the needle. And that's part of what's so funny about this character, is that he's inherently ridiculous, but because he takes his job so seriously and his whole thing is like, I'll do anything for peace, you can then flip the script and have a totally absurd villain and it doesn't lose its grounding.
Yeah, which is wild, because usually if you deal too hard in extremities, then you lose the humor there and you lose the balance. And the fact they keep the balance so well is really that's really a testament to this team working together, because that's hard to do. Yeah, because same, when I saw his villain, I was like, okay, but because I'm just tired of like, I'm a drugged out villain or like caricature, like, okay, we've seen it. But then the very creative way that he takes him down works so well for me. Like, just the way he talked to him, I was like, oh, perfect. I feel bad for the frog that I used to kill this guy.
Poor frogs.
Bummer.
But then that also leads into, in that last bit of the story, Peacemaker, in a pretty short amount of time, has formed like a real emotional attachment to Red B, his handler slash parole officer, and also his B, his number one B that lifts little B weights so he can be really be strong. And the whole sequence of tragedy that links Peacemaker to the B to Red B, like, really finds a little bit of emotion again in this patently absurd character. But when you keep a character on the line, and I think that's so often, and I mean, I know I'm going to be speaking sacrilege to people on the stream here, but Maddie, sometimes that's why Superman doesn't work for me at all, because it's so hard to play Superman funny. He's only good at earnest. And so, whereas Batman, I feel like even though he's so serious, you can take him camp. And so Batman can be a little bit campy, even if he's not like Deadpool campy. But Superman doesn't. And I feel like so often I don't know like how to find that other side of Superman where you're talking about balance. But like Peacemaker, it's just so easy to make him absurd and then relatable and then make him an idiot and then make him sympathetic, that like it just really like kept me rooting for him, I think is the word I'm looking for. I don't often root for Superman other than that because he's Superman. But I was like rooting for Peacemaker in a really fundamental, like, I want this guy to win kind of way throughout this whole series.
Yeah, and the fact that, like, you brought up his relationship with Red B, the fact that despite how goofy this is, we're getting these little pieces of like what happened to Red B before and like kind of why he stopped being in the superhero business and what happened to his like people, because they all died because of this machine back in the day. I know, and the fact that we are talking about really goofy stuff again, cocained up guy they killed with the frog. Okay, that is what just happened. And yet we still have this underlying thing of this very tragic like situation that happened that's going to pay out in a very sad way. So heartwarming. This book shouldn't be heartwarming.
No, that's the thing. I really thought I'd signed up for a kind of profane, funny book in the vein of profanity that I like.
Yeah.
And then when it kind of like got me in the feels a couple times, I was like, what the is Maddie doing to me?
Well, even like I saw the page. There's this really great line that it pays off later, where Red Bee is talking to Peacemaker. He says, "Bees know what happens when they sting. Think about that. Think about the sacrifice to trade your whole world in. It'd have to be really worth it. You'd have to really love someone or act for the greater good. It's the ultimate sacrifice," which I didn't think about until I just read this line.
That was multiple Chekhov guns set on multiple
mantelpieces. If I wasn't online right now, I'd cry about it because that's beautiful. And it does this like foreshadowing you don't think about. That's just, it's such a like beautiful thing. And he's talking about, you know, how to be a real hero and how you just do what needs to be done and you know what that means and how he feels like he's regained himself by working with Peacemaker. Again, this weirdo, he's hanging out with. He's like, man, I've really found my purpose again, working with you. And he's like, man, that's badass, but it's still totally gross. Bees puke honey. He had this amazing, wonderful line to him, and Peacemaker's like, man, it's really gross. It bees puke honey. Love it.
The one thing we haven't really talked about is sort of the innards of this mission. And we spoil stuff on this show, right? Nobody's going to yell at me if I spoil things.
Yeah,
this is a spoiler show. So the whole idea is that at first, Monsieur Mala and the Brain kidnap this adorable dog, Bruce Wayne, to get Peacemaker to steal them the genetic material of Deathstroke. Because the Brain finally wants a body. And what finer body could you have than Deathstroke's body? So this is like a funny background bit for a while, because Deathstroke is, I love when any comic makes fun of Deathstroke, because he's the original template of Deadpool, right? He's like Deadpool as if he wasn't funny. So to me, it's
like Deadpool if he was like a groomer.
Oh yes, there's also the grooming plot from the 80s. But then we actually get Deathstroke kind of on panel in many different forms, and every time it just gets funnier. At one point, Peacemaker has to fight a room full of baby Deathstrokes, and he obviously murders them all, but it's like off panel, because even this book can like winkingly acknowledge that it's oh my.
I'm not just like, you wrote the Deathstroke, but it's so silly.
But just the ability of the book to also know when to cut away, and that's another convention I really love. I love a smash cut to joke on page turn. That's a great device in a comic book. And even the way that Starks and Pugh take it right up to that line, and then they're like, okay, but we're not going to kill babies. Yeah,
they're like, man, I can't believe how many babies we just had to fight. I'm not gonna be able to sleep for a month. I feel like crying right now.
Right, because so layers, right? Can we just show that panel really close on the screen? I just want to like talk about the 1,000 layers of the joke. So they cut away, and so at the top of the next page, Red Bee with a distant 1,000-mile stare. So they cut away. So that's a joke to begin with. Then I can't believe we had to fight all these babies, which makes you picture then all of the ongoing fighting of the babies. And then you're laughing internally, but then one of them says, yeah, I'm going to be crying about it for a month, which makes you think actually it was like really upsetting and tragic, which just like deepens the joke. And that's just all in those two little strips of panel at the top of that page.
And just when you're done thinking about that, they introduce you to one of the best comic characters ever created. And that's
hormonal teenage Deathstroke.
That's Teen Deathstroke. Also use the Teen Titans font, which I love. I'm not Deathstroke. I'm Teen Deathstroke. And I love it because they first introduce who Deathstroke is. They have like his name and then his like, you know, description of World's Assassin. And then they do the whole thing. Sorry. So it says, sorry, Teen Deathstroke, clone, teenage version of the stuff that was said before. And I love him because he's just such a teen. He's like, And Brain's gonna have to kill all the intruders but he's not even my real dad. I just want to dance.
I just want to dance.
And so he's fighting Peacemaker, but the whole time he's like, oh man, it's so much pressure. He's just offloading how he feels. And Deathstroke's like, man, I know what it's like to have a shitty dad. And they're like, they're really understanding each other as they're fighting. It's so good. I just want to dance and play video games. He says, then go dance and play video games. Maybe I will. Good.
Right, which like gets into this inherent wisdom of Peacemaker, right? Because we've set him up so often. He's had this absentee, awful father, toxic masculinity, and he gets this teenager who his father would have been like, dancing isn't manly, don't play games, what? And he just flat out says to him in his totally obvious, out there way of like, just go dance.
Yeah.
And that's what that one clone evil teenager needed to hear. But it's like I just can't get over the layers. Like there's so many, you can read so many 6-issue comic arcs and have nothing to talk about. And the fact that there's so many little things to pull out of this, just kind of like, it's fascinated. Beautiful. It's just like this endlessly refracting little diamond of all of these jokes about, you know, being smart and being stupid and being an idiot and being funny and being serious and maybe being neurodivergent and toxic masculinity and all the stuff. And it just all bounces off each other.
And all of his insights are so insightful. Like they're just, everything he says are so insightful. Like it's so poignant, which is weird. He just,
and it never gets into like very special episode territory. It's never an after school special. No,
they're fighting. And he's like, you know, he's like, yeah, I had a dad who trained me to kill from birth and nothing I did was ever good enough. And, and he talks about like how, when you go to the airport, you have to take your shoes off and they scan your stuff. When you give blood, you get screened, and you have to pass a test to drive a car. But there's nothing to keep an old loser from becoming a dad. Dude put a baby in someone's belly and think they're king of the world. And do this whole thing like a good dad wouldn't tell you that you don't would tell you that you don't suck. And that you're good enough despite what other assholes tell you because you don't suck and you are good enough. A good dad wouldn't let you fight your battles alone. A good dad wouldn't tell you what you're going to be when you grow up, which is great because he says that. And then right behind him, who's not there at this moment, is Red B. So he's saying these things and while actually having his layer of like Red B's behind him. And so he recognizes that this man actually is a good father figure.
Michael? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, ugh. It's so sweet. I love him. And of course, Bruce Wayne returns. That's what really matters.
And also, can I just get Hal Starks to write a whole Suicide Squad book? Because every time we cut away to Harley Quinn or King Shark, it is hilarious.
Like when he wanted to invite them to his birthday party, but they're like, no, we can't go because the last time he spent the whole time showing us his vintage porn collection that he found outside.
In the woods.
In the woods.
And in the woods. Which just made me laugh because this is a recurring joke with my friend group about porn various people found in the woods as teenagers of the woods of New Jersey. So as soon as I read that, I'm like, oh wow, you really grounded this for me.
This is so real.
So real. It feels so real now. But yeah, I don't want to get Harley Quinn fans all riled up. She appears in literally 4 panels maybe of the entire book. But every time it's just a solid gag.
Oh, it's so good. And there's so many good instances. There's some more fighting here. That we have like an ultimate Deathstroke, which is the brain in Deathstroke's body. And then we have a lot of devastating moments amidst comedy of dealing with Red B and his past and trying to get vengeance for his boys that died because of something that the brain created. But still, and then we have this, and we also have, jokes at the same time, but it's really sweet. There's so many things to talk about. Also, I do love that every time he sees Monsieur Malat now, he calls him out like, I know what you did to me. I'm never going to forgive you. Because he thought they were friends because Monsieur Malat pretended to like not know English and pretend to like his music and just hang out with him and then betrayed him at the end. It's like, oh, why would I ever be your friend? I don't like you. And this is after there's a sweet moment where he's like, oh, will you come to my party? Monsieur Malat's like, yeah, I'll come to your party. Like, but in gorilla speak. And he's devastated because he just really wants to make him this party. Oh, Hayden, that would be great. I think Absolutely, he could do that.
I mean, 100% my vote. This has all of the earmarks of a fantastic Harley Quinn writer to me. That whole serio comic, because Harley's got to turn on a dime on every panel between super serious and poignant and then like off the wall. If you make her too zany, you lose why she's such a good character. She's always got to have that
absolutely
Mr. J sincerity to her, or else it doesn't ring.
Yeah. Oh, he could do it, no question. And I know that.
Well, my campaign starts now.
Okay.
For Kyle Starks on Harley.
I'll tell him.
Yeah, please inform Kyle.
I'll pass it down the line. I know that Peter already answered in the chat, but Nikki, yes. So this is just a complete story. It's as far as I know, this is just a one shot, but I'm hoping we get more. I'm just gonna beg Kyle. I'm like, Kyle, I don't know what you to tell DC to make this happen, but I need it.
And again, I knew nothing. I had seen the theme song to the TV show. I've never read a comic with Peacemaker. I have not done a Peacemaker guide, although it's on my list to do in time for the next season. This is the definition of a comic you can pick up, and from the first page, it tells you exactly what you need to know.
Absolutely. Like you don't. Oh, Peacemaker tries harder would be well.
Yes, we need a trilogy, and then Peacemaker tries hardest at the end. Yes.
Or actually, just call it Peacemaker tries harderer, because I think that's the more appropriate.
Oh, see, there you go.
So, how'd you feel about the climactic end?
I mean, I was sad about my boy Red Bee, of course, but I just think that this story was structured in a very specific way that you had to kind of knock down the pins in the order that they got knocked down in order to fulfill the story. There was a lot of Chekhov guns on the mantelpiece. There was a lot of little bits that had to get paid off about violence, about father figures, about revenge, about doing what's right. And so it kind of was a very satisfying set of parentheses that I don't think you could get away with in an ongoing book, because there really aren't a lot of threads to carry on, right? Like it really does resolve, but it kind of gives you all the stuff that you wanted in a way that maybe made me roll my eyes a little bit, like, okay, this is getting a little bit obvious, but not entirely, because it paid off. Like the whole thing with the bees love beer, and then one of the true single page splashes we get in the entire book is just Peacemaker walking away from leaving a beer can in this bee, what is it? Not a bee farm, a beehive, is just like heartbreaking, but it also really, really pays off a whole series worth of silly jokes.
Oh yeah, it's so good. And then of course, the best part of the entire book, the barbecue. I must say Barbie, because I was saying birthday and then barbecue. It all happened. The barbecue birthday party, which filled me with so much joy, because it was the most perfect payoff to the end of this book, when so many people showed up to his birthday party. And I just love that for him. It's such a little kid like arc where you're just like, oh, nobody came to my birthday party, but everybody came to his birthday party.
Well, it also gives you a little bit of satisfaction as the reader, right? Of like, oh, like he did try hard. Like for all of the stupid things and all the potentially offensive things that he says, he actually kind of did right by everybody in the whole book. And I think that I just think, and this is true of Kyle Starks and Marvel Unleashed as well. Actually, I cried at the end of that stupid Pet Avengers book, Kyle Starks, you asshole. It like gives you everything you needed at the end to like feel good about liking this character. And not everybody wants that. Some people really like when a comic has an awful character and then at the end they're just awful, right? Like some people get satisfaction of like, ooh, that was so titillating that I liked this awful character. And I sometimes like those books too. I love a transgressive character. It's why I like who's Batman's bisexual friend that James Tynion invented, Ghostmaker. It's why I love Ghostmaker, because he's terrible. And I love a terrible character. But in a series like this one, I think Kyle Starks really understands that like you have to reward the reader for going along with your bit for 6 issues. And the reward is that we get to feel good about Peacemaker at the end. And a lot of comics authors don't understand that from a structural standpoint, that like, you know, a comic is like a TV episode. It's like a play. You've got to have rising and falling action, but you've got to have an arc for the consumer to like have a feeling of satisfaction in their
Yes.
body, not because the story completed, but because the thematic elements of the story completed. And that's, to me, why this ultimately works. It's not just because it's funny. It's not just because the art and the colors and the lettering are outstanding. It's because the whole creative team really understood how to like give you that little bit of satisfaction that does hold up to an episode of a really good TV show in a way that a lot of comic miniseries don't.
Absolutely agree. Like I've talked before about you need regular human time with comic book characters.
Yes.
To care about them. And I've always said that I think that's a big problem with the big two, especially that we're too busy working in these big action sequences. And we don't get the downtime. We don't get the reward. You don't see often they go to this big event, they do this big fight, they beat the big bad, and we don't get to see them celebrate it or relax ever. It's just, oh, well, now the next one. We don't get that.
Well, and that's
time.
why books like Uncanny X-Men and Teen Titans are celebrated from the 80s, and also a lot of Spider-Man books, because they were the books that gave us those moments. Like if you read a lot of Batman from the late 80s, when he got super, super big, it doesn't have a lot of humanity for Bruce Wayne. Yeah. He's kind of just this automaton. And I like 1988, 89, 90 post-crisis Batman, but there's a reason that a lot of these books that are like venerated and that have the most reprints and the most readers are what they are, and that's because they're the books that established the idea of superheroes as humans in the modern comics era.
And that's why you have some people that are just so hungry, I mean, me especially, for these, like, how we have the webtoons of, like, the Wayne family adventures, which gives me exactly what I want. And it's one of those things that I feel like Western comics could learn from manga in a lot of ways that they don't do. So, like, when you're talking about the payoff at the end of all of this, One Piece was just the longest manga ever. It's not the longest manga ever, but it's over 1,000 chapters. At the end of each arc, we have a party. We have downtime. And that's like the treat for everyone. Everyone gets together. You have a literal party in the book, and we all get to relax together. We've all earned it. And it feels good to have that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of indie books have kind of learned that lesson, not only from manga, but also from European BD, right? Mm-hmm. And I think of books like Giant Days. I think of books like Lumberjanes. I think of books like Fence, if you've ever read Fence.
I love Fence.
Major favorite of mine. Oh my goodness. Super, super gay too. That they learn that like what you really want to do is like totally be sucked into the soap opera of the characters. And I feel like Western or Marvel and DC comics are so dedicated to trying to make people feel like they got value for $4 in this very widescreen way that Brian Hitch and Mark Miller created with the Ultimates and Authority in the early 2000s, that they've like forgotten that it's actually probably, if you look at all the moments we highlighted in this, how many were fights? 2? We went back to every human moment in this comic book, and that's what made these issues worth $4 or $5 an issue, not like the kick in the dick. Like that was funny, but it's not what's I'm gonna remember.
Yeah, and that's a downside. A lot of like, the whole like floppy deal. A lot of times, not always. This worked out with this, but a lot of times it's if you go floppy to floppy, you don't have enough time. You're like, okay, I've got to really kill it for 6 issues. I've got to make it like action packed and busy and all this stuff. If I have the downtime, or if they don't renew my book.
Right. It's not their fault. Like, especially with books getting canceled pretty much by the 3rd issue. It's like, well, you have to do unrelenting. I mean, you have to be the villain who snorts the cocaine for your first 3 issues, because if you don't, your book's not going to make it. I mean, I look at Eve Ewing's Black Panther, which by issue 7 and 8, I was totally hooked on, but I hated the first 3 issues, and it was because they were slow. I'm not immune to this. I'm not some paragon of taste that loves every slow comic. I thought the first 3 issues were slow, and I talked shit on it on the Solicit stream, and now I feel personally responsible that it got canceled because I talked shit on it because the first 3 issues were slow.
We've all been there. It happens. It happens, and then I'm like, oh, I was wrong. That was TV shows, with me happens books. It is what it is. So, first of all, it's been really fun. We had to do our rating.
I forget that I get to assign numerical values to the quality of art on this show, which I love to do.
Yeah. So this one for me, I think last time I rated it, I gave it a 10 out of 10. And I think I still want to do that. The cocaine guy makes me want to give it a 9 out of 10, but I'm honestly just so in love with this. And I can be a generous rater. I will say that. But I love this book so much. Even reading it again, and I want everybody to read it. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 10 out of 10.
Wow.
I'm gonna stand by it.
So I rate each issue as I go. I have a huge database that rates and has comments on every comic book issue I've read. but sometimes when you go back, it's like people who rate tracks on an album and then they go, well, all the tracks are a 3, so the album must be a 3. I'm like, well, no, because if no track stuck in your head and they're all, I do out of 5. If all the tracks were 6 out of 10, is the album a 6 out of 10? I would argue it's like a 4 or 5 out of 10 because nothing like stuck to your ribs. So I was looking at my ratings for this and I gave some like 4, 4.5. Some of the issues in the middle were more of a 3, 3.5. I'm sorry, out of 10, 8.
Yeah, you're 5. You could do out of 5. Who cares?
Yeah. But in the end, I think it's an 8 out of 10 because I loved it. And when I went back to page through it today to reflect on it, it made me smile and start reading again. And like, to me, that's what an 8 out of 10, that's like the definition of an 8 out of 10 book. If you pick it back up, you can't help but start reading it. Is it perfect? No. But when you have a lot of trouble putting it down, yes. And to me, that is the definition of 8 out of 10.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, I'm very much like a feelings rater. And so I always say like, different things are different, right? So like I'm gonna rate a comedic book differently than I rate something dramatic or serious or slice of life, right? And this one, it delivered exactly what I wanted to in a way that I was really surprised by. Even though I knew, because it's Kyle Starks, I would love it. I love this. I love it so much.
I'm so happy you made me read it. I would have never, I would have just paged through it when I made my Peacemaker guide. I would have never read it. Never.
It's so good. I want to buy some of these like prints of the covers too.
And the covers are Chris Anka.
They're so good.
Really pushing outside of his style that he's known for. I would have never in 100 guesses, I don't think.
This the one of him and Monsieur Mala of this like Die Hard look is really good. I'm trying to think of my other favorites. I mean, this one I think is my favorite. It's also the inside cover of the book. The Peacemaker tries hard for Triferno. I love a dumb joke. I love a dumb joke so much, and this is great. So normally we leave time for chat, but normally I would just say we talk forever because I'm having so much fun. Will you please come back?
I will come back whenever you want me to come back. I gave Maddie a list of my 10 favorite books that I was pretty sure she had never read.
Yeah, I want to read one of your picks now.
Yeah, and so we will definitely have to have a return engagement at some point.
Yeah, this is great. I always say this. I've had a day because work is hard, and this
work is hard.
This cheered me up. This has been wonderful. Oh, Hayden, I'm right about give this show starring Maddie and Peter 10.
Aw.
I'm assuming by love the dog, you mean the dog in the book. Because none of my dogs are nearby, unfortunately.
Your cat has been through a couple of times.
Always.
Yeah.
I got a complaint once when I was editing a video. Because when I film and edit a video, like for reels, she'll show up and meow the whole time in the background. And I have one where I've like thrown her off. And you have to toss a cat. And you're like, I can't believe you would toss a cat like that. I'm like, they're cats.
They're cats. Fine. The distance from here to the ground beside me to a cat is... Yeah, you didn't throw it at something.
We can talk about Buffy rumors. Yeah, send me those, Hayden.
Although I don't know. I've quit Buffy cold turkey. I'm not going back.
I had to quit when Boom did their stuff and just ruined it.
It was so bad. Oh my! Can we have 60 seconds to talk about this? I'm a Buffy super fan. I have every hardcover. I have the DVDs, Blu-ray, everything.
We gotta do a show. You mean Kristen?
I started buying this Boom series. And I was like, "What the ever living hell is this?"
And they were like, "But Dan Mora's on the art for like 3 issues," and like, now it's bad. The
Angel book was okay for a little bit. I don't begrudge them making a Buffy from scratch because there were things to fix. Like I'm totally cool with a remix, but it was just not good.
It's so disappointing. I never thought because I was like I bought everything. I have the full collection, right? And then I was like,
same. And I keep thinking like, should I sell it? Am I over this now? Like,
I'm keeping. Well, I'm just gonna save it until like one day I'm like in dire financial need and then I'll sell it. But yeah, I ended up selling my Boom Deluxes because I was like, I hate this. I hate it so much. And I haven't gone back. I just wait for Hayden to tell me what's happening.
Well, apparently there's hot goss from Hayden.
Oh, whoa! The rumor is Disney snatched the rights from Boom because it's not on their website anymore or their web store.
Ooh, so maybe we get a reboot.
I've been burned. I'll just have to trust Hayden to check it out. Tell me if it's good. It's like an ex, boyfriend. I'm like, I don't know. I can't trust them anymore. I've been too.
For me, it's like once I turn something off, like I can't waffle. Like if I stopped drinking and then I've been sober for 10 years. I stopped eating sugar a couple months ago. Now I'm not eating anything with sugar. Like when I make a decision, I go hard. So if I'm not going to be into Buffy anymore, I got to commit. So don't mess with my feelings, Hayden. Only pull me back in if it's actually good, okay?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay.
I learned so much about bees I didn't know I needed. Hey, there you go.
Honey stomach. Now I'm going to start using honey stomach as a euphemism which is going to make it even funnier.
I can't. If this was an AMA, I would. It's not, though. We'll have to have... Let's tell Omar to have both of us on for an AMA just so we have an excuse to be silly and not worry about what's required from you.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine me with no filter? Sweet
I want that. Desperately. Desperately, I want it. Absolutely. Okay, so Sir Crisis. Oh, I'm losing it. It's late.
Some people think my name is Chris Is. They're like, Chris is what?
Chris is what? People know where to find you, but please tell them again anyways.
I have something called a blog that not all of you may be familiar with at this late stage of internet capitalism, but it's on crushingcrisis.com, and I have comic book guides to help you find the collections that you want to read the characters in, to help you figure out what orders the collections go in. And every month I cover, or every week, I talk about all of Marvel's new releases to help you understand, like, is this a good place to jump in? Is this an interesting book? And I try to take the same approach that Maddie takes on the show, which is like, even if I hate it in the very fiber of my being, is it something you might like for reasons? And so that is my whole raison d'etre, to do comic book stuff. And that's why I love being on, finally, officially, on Old Reader New Reader.
Well, I'm obsessed with you, so you have to come back.
The feeling is definitely mutual.
And listen, you have saved me. And I've said it before, like when you're on before, but if not for you, I would not have all my Titans stuff together. Because I remember,
hilarious, because I've never read a Titans comic book from before,
which I loved. And honestly, some of them are not good. And I know it's a real labor of love for me to own all of it. It's tough out here. Yes, because I was remember that Patreon.
I do. I don't tend to say, because I feel like I'm a guest in this house, and I want you all to pay for this Patreon because it lets these wonderful shows happen, and I wholeheartedly support them. And when I'm not on the air, I'm in the comments being a fan. You've seen me in there. So, but I do have a Patreon too that helps pay for all of the various pulleys and levers in the background of this process that makes all of this happen, hair included. So that's
very important.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. Peter, thank you so much for being here. It's been lovely. Chat, thank you so much for just being great. You're all great people, and I really appreciate you a lot. And I had so much fun talking about this book today. If you're watching this video, I always forget this part, but I'm going to try to do it. If you're watching this video later, I hope you like this video. Comment down below your thoughts on Peacemaker Tries Hard and any recommendations you have for future videos. I'll be back next week, probably with something I haven't planned April yet. So, gotta do that. And you know what? Maybe next time Peter's here.
Maybe that'll be when I'm on the Q&A. I don't know if I could put that on the public internet.
You're right. That's sacred. Let's say it for an AMA. But of course, I'll be back here on Tuesdays as usual. And I hope you all have a good rest of your night. Check out the eclipse. That's later. That's a few weeks from now. Never mind. Anyways, have a good rest of your night, everybody. See y'all next time. Oops. This is my little